It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, November 2nd, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, journalist Katie Gilbert on the socialist experiment in Mississippi. Meanwhile, Republicans dropped their hot mess of a tax deal. Donna Brazile reveals details of a Clinton DNC deal. Trump in the White House, apoplectic in the wake of the Manafort indictments, and the DOJ prepares to charge Russian hackers in the DNC hacking case. Meanwhile, coal miners in southern Pennsylvania reject retraining, waiting for MAGA. The EPA chief bans EPA-funded scientists from the EPA advisory boards. That's the classic, wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would let me in move, / just want to make sure science doesn't interfere with corporations raping the environment.
About maintaining independence.
FCC lowers the boom on local TV and opens the door for big conglomerates. Trump wall or would-be builders fear discrimination amongst normal people. And the Democrats' marginally better deal platform just got marginally better. And lastly, Robert Mercer quits his company and sells his stake in Breitbart. All that and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot of news to get to. This story that Donna Brazile has written. I'll give you the too long don't read version, because we won't get to this until the fun half of the program. You'll recall that I think it was over the summer, probably in the spring of last year, the story came out that Hillary Clinton's campaign apparatus, fundraising apparatus, had a relationship with the states that was denying. It was the Victory Fund, which was the joint fundraising committee comprised of Clinton's presidential campaign, the DNC, and 32 state party committees. It allowed Clinton to solicit checks of more than $350,000 from high-end donors. And then it transferred that money, $3.8 million, to the states. But then that money was then resent to the DNC and ended up in a fund essentially run by a Clinton campaign staffer. And the whole deal had to do with recent changes to campaign finance where there were no limitations on where you could spread money around. Or there was no cap on donors in their total giving. And so what they would do is they would give ostensibly to the states, and it functioned like, you hear those stories of a certain country where, let's say, foreigners can't invest into, right? Americans can't invest in country X. And so you get someone in country X to be essentially your proxy. And it's your investment, but they're your proxy. It's their name on the title. That deal was something like that, and we spoke about that over the summer. But Donna Brazil has written a piece basically saying, I came in and I found this deal that outlined this. And really the big part about this story was that it gave so much authority to the Clinton campaign in terms of how that money was directed and DNC resources were used. Obviously, this is at the beginning of the campaign back in 2015. They made this deal. Bernie Sanders was aware of this deal. He spoke out against it, I guess, in 2016, once he realized that he had a chance to win the election. But nevertheless, interesting development, not just for what it tells us, because some of that of which we knew, but that Donna Brazil is the one who's telling us.
Donna Brazil was deep cover. That's why she needed to give my wife the questions in advance of CNN to throw her off the trail.
Double agent.
Now I can only hope that my wife doesn't get her hands on her.
Triple agent,
maybe
right.
Through you, Sam.
She's going to get Vince Fostered.
She's going to get Vince Fostered times Seth Rich. And here on mini MSNBC, you're going to run interference. You're going to deny that the whole thing was rigged, even though now you have the proof. I would say listen to Lee Camp. Other honest reporters like Tim Black.
Part of the problem.
By the way, that was pretty embarrassing for you, wasn't it?
When
he called in the show.
Yes.
You got slammed.
Yes, that happened months ago.
Wrecked.
You're very late on this. It's just breaking now. Sam Clovis has withdrawn from consideration for the Agriculture Department post that he had to admit yesterday was completely unqualified for, which makes it really hard to justify why you're up for a post when you have absolutely no scientific background.
Hey, Sam, when was the last time you covered the Department of Agriculture? Just out of curiosity.
Just now.
Yeah, before that. When was the time right? When was the last time you covered it?
Probably, I don't know, when Clovis was first nominated.
So just coincidentally, as soon as Donna Brazil has blown the lid off of this whole thing, and you want to minimize it because you're a goddamn Chris Hayes lesbian-looking shill, you go right over to Sam Clovis. You ought to be disgusted with yourself. I think after what Tim Black did to you, you might have taken a moment to reflect on being a sellout careerist who hasn't done anything worthwhile since a goddamn cameo in Sex and the City.
I knew you
but
were
now
gonna
you're
say
still.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, well, sometimes you're just beats you got to hit, Sam. You wouldn't know that, though, as a failed comedian.
Apparently, someone spent the night on YouTube. But we will talk more about this as we go. But it's a good development, and apparently the part of the story is that the DNC was completely deprived of funds, in part because Barack Obama left Debbie Wasserman Schultz there, whom apparently everyone thought was completely incompetent, and he was happy to have a total incompetent there because he didn't want the competition in terms of any power base outside the White House. But
check the couch change, Jill girl. Oh, what? World star, baby.
All right, so before we get to this interview with Katie Gilbert on Chakwe Antar Lumumba, and what's going on in Jackson, still fallout obviously from the terror attack on Tuesday, and you know, we didn't get into a deep discussion with it here. I spoke with Digby about it for Ring of Fire, and I imagine we'll talk about it with Cliff. But, you know, the bottom line is the distinction between this attack on Monday, or I should say on Tuesday in New York City, where a man drove a truck down the West Side Highway bike lane to kill people and did. When you compare and contrast that with the man in Las Vegas who fired a automatic weapon on a crowd of 20,000 people, killing almost 3 times as many people, injuring almost 50 times more people. When you start asking why did they do this, the reason why you ask these questions is how can we prevent this in the future? How can we mitigate? And to the extent that we can't prevent it in the future, how can we mitigate the damage that can take place? In Las Vegas, the obvious way of mitigating what happens there is perhaps, I guess, to increase security. I don't know how you would prevent people from bringing guns in, frankly, in their luggage. But you could prevent access to guns. Now, we don't do that in this country because of statutes and because of interpretations of the Constitution and because of massive amounts of money that are poured into our political system. When you contemplate what could be done in the case of New York, you could put more sophisticated curbing, which is there in New York in many places. And you could maybe make it harder for someone to do that with a truck, or at least give them maybe a little more heads up that, hey, something's going weird. Why is that truck weaving through these different pylons to get onto this thing, whatever it is? But because there was no direct connection to ISIS, because there was nothing operational, because the guy didn't travel to Syria to get training, because he was just a guy living here, came in as an immigrant 8 years ago, I suppose you could say we're not going to allow any immigrants in, but as Ronald Reagan pointed out on Twitter yesterday, that if you read this book about the terror plot that was stopped in the 90s, it was stopped by a guy who came in the exact same visa from Egypt. So, you're not necessarily going to get less. In fact, there's a good argument that you could get more of this if you, because for every one immigrant you let in who is ultimately going to do something like this, you are probably letting in hundreds, if not thousands, who would be in the best position to stop someone from doing something like this. So the idea that there's a broader lesson here is only a narrative that's going to be pushed by people. There's no practical application for making an issue of this guy's religion or the fact that he followed ISIS on YouTube. Any more than there was when, hey, rock and roll music is driving people to commit suicide. Unless there's some type of operational ties, there's just no value in it unless you have another agenda. Like, let's say this guy, Brian Kilmeade, whose agenda might be, hey, we need another block of programming. Oh, how about our anti-Muslim block?
See something, say something. If I see an angry Muslim who goes into a supermarket always arguing with the cashiers, is that enough for me to go up to an officer and say I'm saying something without being labeled anti-Islamic?
If you just see someone who's angry and from a religious community, that is not enough.
That is not enough. So at least they were good enough to bring on someone who would say, that's not enough. Frankly, I think the proper response is, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, that's Waleed Faris, who is not a great guy.
And
he could.
And if he becomes the voice of reason, right? Like what? Where
that is first step to jihad. You complain at grocer. Number one.
You start yelling, why don't you have halal hot dogs in your
I think
7-Eleven?
you have overcharged for many soft drinks. And Baghdadi has released new fatwa. I'm going to blow the whole fucking thing up.
Is this gum fresh? I am a Muslim and must know.
This is not cinnamon. I am a Muslim, sir. This grocer is not Sharia compliant.
I wonder if he's got is he going through something at his local bodega?
Kilmeade's having an anxiety attack because he's like, I think he's a Muslim guy.
He seems mad. And I think he's Muslim.
It's probably like a Dominican guy speaking in Spanish to his friend.
Right, exactly. I wonder how polite and nice Kilmeade is as a customer in some of these places.
Oh, fuck you, Sam. It's a serious question. It's a Muslim being rude. Go listen to some Fleetwood Mac and kill yourself.
I bet something like 70% of the vendors who deal with Kilmeade on any type of regular basis are like, oh, this fucking asshole again.
Or like, what the hell is the matter with that guy?
Oh.
He still doesn't know how the Slurpee machine works.
All right. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking to journalist Katie Gilbert on the socialist experiment that is taking place in the form, possibly, of Chokwe Lumumba. We'll be right back. We are back, Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Like to welcome to the program Katie Gilbert. She's a freelance writer who is writing for OxfordAmerican.org. The piece is The Socialist Experiment. Welcome to the program, Katie.
Thank you very much.
So, all right, Katie, let's just start with this. Before we go into the story of Chokwe Lumumba and Antar Lumumba, and frankly, Jackson, Mississippi, I'm curious, why did you write this piece?
Sure. Well, as I touched on pretty briefly in the piece, I've spent several years as a regular contributor for a financial trade magazine called Institutional Investor. And the beat I'd kind of assumed for 5 years or so was socially responsible investing. So this idea that there are investment products that are more focused on being kinder to the environment or human rights or what have you, and that this can help make our economy fairer. It interested me for a while, but I started to feel I was getting a lot more interested in grassroots versions, trying to achieve those same goals rather than some of these products that are being thought of on Wall Street. So I started looking around for what I was thinking of as economic experiments around the United States, and especially those that were gaining traction since the recession. And I found a few. I visited a commune in Virginia that's not new. It's been around 50 years, and a few other things. But when I came upon what was happening in Jackson, Mississippi, I was very interested. The first thing I learned about happening there was this effort around developing a network of worker cooperatives that would create good jobs for people in the city where there's a big problem with longstanding poverty there. Businesses that would meet human needs and also not move if they weren't turning enough of a profit, which the city's had a problem with.
All right, well hold on. Before we get into what is actually was in Jackson, Mississippi, tell us, just give us a sense of Jackson, Mississippi as a place to sort of, I guess, let us know the context in which these experiments are taking place.
Right, yeah, that is important. Jackson, Mississippi is obviously the capital of the state. It's had an interesting history in the past few decades, and it's changed a lot. So it was a majority white city as recently, I believe, as the early 70s, mid-70s, and as things started to change in Jackson, similar to a lot of southern cities, as schools were desegregated and the kind of white segregationist power structure started to crumble, it experienced a lot of white flight. So it's now an 85% black city. The city was shrinking pretty quickly in the 90s, and it's leveled off a bit. It shrunk a little bit more slowly in the first decade of 2000, but it's struggling with a declining tax base. It's having a hard time making payments on things as basic as keeping up its infrastructure. So as soon as you go to Jackson, Mississippi, one of the first things you'll hear anyone talking about are all the potholes that just aren't being addressed. The water distribution system is facing problems, and there was a scare with lead last year, as I recall. So it's facing some pretty fundamental problems in meeting some of its basic needs as a city. And even in the downtown, there are a lot of storefronts that are empty. But obviously there are a lot of really great and interesting things happening there too, which I think we'll get into in terms of seeing some of these problems as an opening to rethink how economic solutions might be proposed.
And we should say Jackson is the biggest city in Mississippi by far, right? I mean, there's like 170,000 some odd people there, and I think the next closest city is probably like closer to 65,000. So this is the biggest city in the state. And so tell us about the history of, I mean, this isn't the existence of a socialist experiment in these co-ops is not particularly new per se. Give us a sense of like what a brief recounting, and your piece is very comprehensive on this, but give us a brief recounting of sort of the history leading up to, let's say, the last 10 years or so.
Right. And there are so many pieces to it, so I admit I do sometimes have a hard time being brief, especially when writing about it. But basically, I think a good place to start in looking at the history and understanding what's happening in Jackson right now is the late 60s, when a group formed in Detroit called the Provisional Government, the Republic of New Africa. And what this group was seeking to do was create a new nation and a new society within it that would be based in socialist principles. It would be majority black and led by black people, and it would occupy 5 southern states, which this group thought that it would be able to peacefully petition the U.S. government for as a sort of reparations. And the idea was that if you could have a separate nation, you could appeal to international bodies with human rights issues, and the people who formed this group had determined that the United States government had shown that they didn't have any interest in doing that when it came to some of the violence and atrocities that black people were facing in this country. So there was not a lot of headway made petitioning the government, not surprisingly. And there was a day in the early 70s when a few members of this group went down to Mississippi because they had bought land from a farmer there and decided that if they couldn't have all 5 of these states, they would at least take control of some land and build a dining hall, a few things, and where black people could go and start to democratically create together a new society where everyone would have what they need and be treated with fairness.
A commune.
Right. Yeah. I didn't see them use that word necessarily, but it's what it sounded like to me. Chokwe Lumumba was in law school at the time, and he was one of the people who went there in the early 70s, what they called Land Celebration Day, to move on to this land and start to build something there. And it was only a few months before the farmer who sold them that land reneged on the oral agreement. They didn't have the land anymore. And long story short, over the next few years, didn't make a lot of headway in attracting people to the cause, faced a lot of pressure from COINTELPRO and other issues that they faced from law enforcement. But people like Chokwe Lumumba still had this vision, this idea of creating a new society where they felt that there would not be racial inequity, class inequity, and the rest of it. So he formed a couple of groups, and in the 90s, one of them was the Malcolm X grassroots movement that had a different tack, really, but wanted to focus on this idea of creating new political systems, economic systems that were fairer. The idea at that point for MXGM, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, wasn't necessarily, sovereignty anymore, but this kind of different organizing tactic. And that group in the early 2000s started to write a document called the Jackson-Kush Plan that laid out three main pillars in trying to push this really ambitious goal of societal change in the United States, staging the experiment in Jackson, Mississippi, but letting that experiment be a model to the rest of the country and the world, especially cities facing similar problems.
Let me ask you this. Why, I mean, was it just by chance that it was Jackson, Mississippi, or was there a sense that there was the proper or perfect context to like both a need and the resources? And I mean, was there something about Jackson that became there was a sense amongst the MXGM and that in Lumumba that Jackson was the place to do this, as opposed to, I don't know, Detroit?
Yeah, it's a great question. There was a really determined, concerted decision made that Jackson was the place to do this. And that was even voted on by MXGM members at the national level. And as it's been explained to me, the reasons that Jackson was seen as the perfect place to, again, kind of be the staging ground for this ambitious experiment was that, one, it's majority black. Two, it's within a region of the United States, it's majority black. The way that the Jackson-Kush Plan gets the name Kush is from what's referred to by this group as the Kush District, 18 contiguous counties in the western part of Mississippi that are either majority black, or there's one that's 47% black. So there's this idea that black people in that region will be likely to accept these ideas and bring them into their own communities as well, and to spread them. And Mississippi itself is about 40% black, with the highest concentration of black people in the country. So, and in addition to that, Jackson, it was seen as an asset kind of to this group that there's not a lot of industrial power, economic engines there right now. It leaves this void that needs to be filled with some reimagining. So
the I don't want to say the depression, but the lack of genuine economic engines was seen as a positive, because there's going to be less entrenched interests that would resist or be more resistant to some type of change.
That's right. Yeah, that's how I've heard it explained.
And
exactly.
And what can you tell us about the way the relationship between the idea that there was such a high concentration of black folk and the sense that also would contribute to, I guess, the buy-in to a different economic system or organizational structure in that area?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's something that I've wondered about too. I think as I heard Rukia Lumumba explain it this way, and her sister, who also ran his campaign, that this vision was never, or is certainly not now, exclusively for black people, but black people historically in this country, as well as other groups like indigenous people, have borne the brunt of the system that we have built up here, that has been built up here, and have been excluded from a lot of the economic gains that our system has wrought. And so the idea, at least among this group, it's not necessarily totally clear whether this plays out, but the idea is that leaves Black people and, frankly, disenfranchised people more broadly, more likely to have an open mind when it comes to radical reimaginings of the dominant economic system.
So so on one level, I guess the sort of cultural, or I guess specifically the racial homogeny in that instance is one less barrier to accepting something that is radically different. I mean, there's also, I think, in this country, a very strong tradition. I don't know if it was a couple of months ago, we spoke to Robin Kelly about his work on African American communists in the 30s, primarily trying to organize in Alabama. But there's certainly I guess a longstanding tradition. But it's interesting that the different sort of, I guess, contexts that these folks wanted to, that they saw as advantageous to them. And I guess in terms of building solidarity, there was also, at the very least, certainly the first go-round, a lot of solidarity imposed upon them by the KKK in some respects.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm sure exactly as a similar idea here, although the fact was that when the PGRNA, that provisional government of the Republic of New Africa, came to Jackson in the 70s, hoping to kind of have a lot of people there, Black people specifically, flock to the cause, it didn't really happen. And I think the expectation was that there was that kind of solidarity that would come from fear and oppression and some of the forces there. But people in Jackson at the time, including Black people, saw this idea as kind of coming from somewhere outside, not necessarily a homegrown idea. The people who were leading it weren't people they knew. And so that made it hard for the PGRNA at the time. And like I said, they were facing lots of other challenges too. But I think Cooperation Jackson, the group today that's building cooperatives and operating on the Jackson Cush plan of this new society vision, is coming up against challenges too, in a similar way, that it's not necessarily the case that everybody who's struggling economically wants a similar type of solution or
right.
has similar ideas about what a good radical path forward would be.
All right. Well, so let's talk about Chokwe Lumumba, his how he gets into politics. I mean, at one point in your piece, when you're talking about his son, and I guess I may have neglected to mention that his son obviously is now the sitting mayor of Jackson as of, I guess, 5 or 6 months ago. But the question that you raise in the piece is, can you be a politician and a revolutionary simultaneously? Tell us about how Chokwe Lumumba came to run and win the race for mayor in Jackson, and what was his agenda?
Mm-hmm. Well, when Chokwe Lumumba first ran for office, it was in 2009, I believe, for city council. And he hadn't long entertained visions of himself as a politician. He was a lawyer. He was a noted lawyer for defending Black nationalists and had been for a while. But around that time, the Jackson Cush plan was kind of being finalized, and one of its pillars is nurturing this network of progressive local politicians who support the Jackson Cush plan. So one of the authors of the Jackson Cush plan approached Chokwe Lumumba and asked if he'd consider running for mayor. And at the time, Lumumba decided, no, he and the organization weren't quite ready for that. What if he ran for city council? And some of the other folks in MXGM approached his son, then I think about 25, Chokwe and Lumumba, and asked him to consider running for city council or considering a run for mayor later on. At the time, Ansar said, "No, I've just gotten back to Jackson after law school. I'm about to get married. I just don't see myself as a politician anyway." And he even talked to his father and asked if, should his father really be doing this? But ultimately, it was decided that Lumumba would run, and he won the council race, obviously. He went on to run for mayor in 2013. And he wasn't necessarily a strong kind of front runner in the race the whole time. He won the he finished in second place in the Democratic primary, and in Jackson, the Democratic primary is really what decides the winner. So since nobody had won a majority, it went to a runoff election, and he had kind of a very decisive debate, and a lot of people see that as kind of what tipped the race in his favor, and he ended up winning the mayoral election by a pretty slim margin. And I think at the time there was a lot of excitement among people who knew about the Jackson Kush plan and supported it. There was, not surprisingly, some apprehension from people who knew Lumumba as this former black nationalist and wanted to see him however they wanted to see him. But he was in office for 8 months and was pretty widely regarded from just about everyone I talked to in Jackson as someone who helped bring the city together, was willing to work across the aisle, and was starting to make headway in Jackson, but died suddenly, unfortunately, 8 months after he took office.
Had he begun to institute anything that people perceived as radical, or was there? I mean, because there was one politician, I guess, who was from the State House, who had said to him at one point, according to your piece, like, I was a little bit worried about you because you were sold to me as someone who was divisive, but you're not that way at all. Was that was that an assessment of Lumumba's policies, or was it an assessment of his approach?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I think that given how briefly he was in office, it was more of an assessment of his approach. But that said, I mean, his main policy achievement while in office was instituting this 1% sales tax that something like 90% of the city of Jackson voted on. And that was going to be creating this fund to help pay for some much needed infrastructure fixes in the city. And a lot of people in Jackson saw that as a big achievement because the administration had managed to get so many people to come over to this pretty unpopular decision to tax themselves, but that he had sold it well. But then again, that's not a radical policy, and there are some people within his administration who didn't see that as a political direction they wanted the administration to go. And this kind of gets back to your question about, can you be both a revolutionary and a politician? You know, someone who kind of makes the trains run on time and has to sell a tax increase to people while also envisioning major systemic change. I mean,
right.
Whether that would have happened.
You got to do the potholes. Yeah. You got to
right.
literally fill the potholes as mayor. And so there was really no sense as to that experiment was too nascent in some ways
I think so.
All right. So let's talk about his son, because, I mean, it's interesting and it's hard to sort of interpret. His son runs for who had really, according to your piece, no design ever to be an elected politician, and literally at the deathbed of his father makes the decision to run and to fill his position as mayor. He loses his first election in 2014, and he runs again in 2017. Let's pick it up there. On what ticket does he run, and what is his platform?
Well, he did run as a Democrat, and in a pretty crowded field. There were by primary day 9 other Democrats on the ticket. His platform, I mean, he talked a lot about having this people's platform. When I become mayor, you become mayor, and democratizing as many kind of city decision-making processes as possible. So one way his father did that was through people's assemblies where different neighborhoods would gather together, and the mayor would be there, members of his administration, to listen to problems in different neighborhoods and kind of help decide on what solutions would be. So that's a part of the platform. He talked a lot, Chokwe Antar talked a lot in the debates I went to and in interviews I listened to about worker cooperatives. And he stresses that the idea is not to turn the whole economy into, a network of worker cooperatives, but that there needs to be more of an effort in people in Jackson investing in their own businesses and services that they need, and not relying on outside corporations to kind of descend in and bring the jobs. But Antar also talks about the need for others to come and invest in the city. So he definitely has some moderation when he talks about some of these radical ideas that, a little bit of the worker cooperatives would be good, a little bit of the investment would be good too, but we need to be involving everyone in the city in these processes and making them very transparent. And he's been in office about 100 days now. He just hit that mark a couple of days ago, I believe, and there'll be a State of the City speech in a couple of days. So I think, again, it's so early, not many specifics to kind of share yet, but it's going to continue to be really interesting to watch.
All right, so asking for an assessment on how he's doing at this point, a little bit premature. But let me just lastly ask you this. In talking to you, in your reporting and in conversations you've had with him, in terms of his perspective on what he wants to achieve, is his, when he starts to talk about things like, bringing in, I guess private partnerships, I don't know if he articulated it that way, but is his perspective like, we need to do this slowly, like we need to walk people down this path slowly, or is it, is his incrementalism a tactic or a strategy, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's, during the campaign, it definitely seemed like a strategy. I mean, I think that in communicating some of these ideas that had gotten his father labeled as a radical, he saw the need to, I don't think misconstrue them, but make them more widely understood and more palatable to people. And so now that he's in office, I think it's true that kind of taking small steps towards some of the ideas that, look more like socialism or whatever it may be, will be a strategic move. But again, I mean, that's speculation on my part, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone within the administration since Inauguration Day, so that would be a good
Are you
thing.
planning to do a follow-up?
Maybe so. I mean, it's definitely the case that, now that he's in office, after he's in office a year or two, there'll be a whole other story to tell about this, I think, and I will definitely want to know what it is.
Well, I think we will too. Katie Gilbert, the piece is The Socialist Experiment. It's an Oxford American. We will link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sam.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, folks, we are in the midst of our survey extravaganza, wherein we extravagantly invite you to take our survey, which will help us get a better sense of why you listen, how you listen, what you might listen to. Listen, or watch, I guess. So regardless of how you consume the show, if you're a member, we have at Majority Report, what is it, majoritysurvey.com? Son of a gun. I was doing so well with that pitch, and then I forgot what it was called. Majoritysurvey.com is the URL. And if you head over to majoritysurvey.com, you will have the option of clicking on the free show. That's if you're not a member, whether we give you a deal on the membership or not. If you're not a member and you don't have access to the fun half, then you just click on the free show. If you only watch, if you're watching me right now on YouTube, then you click on the YouTube one. If you're a member of the show, you get the full access to the full podcast. Click on the member one, and only do it once. But that's all you need to do. Do it once, and it'll take you like 6 or 7 minutes, depending on which one of these you end up taking. So, really important, very helpful to us. And so, thank you in advance. Of course, you can go fill out the free show survey and then say, hey, I'm going to become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com, wherein you become a member. Don't forget, if you want to, if you purchase your items, want to see what we're offering via Amazon or jet.com, head over to majorityreportkickback.com. Click through there. Purchase your items through there. That's a helpful thing to do for yourself. Got to be very careful with the language. In a certain sense. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Right now they have that, what's that one, Brendan, which is the one that we have? It's a seasonal one, I've been told. It's the...
Brendan, what do we got?
It's the Day of the Dead one, or Waking the Dead. Oh, yeah, all right.
Nice.
Wow,
So
I forgot.
Product
I could
placement
actually
right there.
Wake the Dead.
Show
It's
it to the camera, dude.
Nicaraguan and Guatemalan blend. This is the one. And then, of course, we also got the, no, not this one, the Majority Report.
Did they
one.
get started in the 80s with
a
the Sandinistas? Is that how far back it goes?
It's possible.
Yeah.
And here, of course, is the Majority Report blend, which you can get. Show your friends. It's also great. This is a Ethiopian, Ugandan, Indonesian blend, which I personally chose. No, I mean I didn't.
Yeah, sure.
I just said I wanted a blend. All right, folks, justcoffee.coop. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. See you in the fun half.
He is like the dog. He says no, 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 no. And though he'd like to fall, he says no, 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 no. He says you're just a friend to me.
spam, but we are back. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the famous fun half of the Majority Report, wherein we say goodbye to all those riffraff that we don't want around. We don't want them. We don't want them.
We don't want your kind.
We don't want those
exploiters.
All those takers.
They take
This is
us.
like
They
the fun half is for the makers.
They take. It's true.
It's all the makers in the fun half. All those takers, they just sit there and they go, oh, I'm not going to call in, add to the show. I'm just going to.
This would be a great day, though, for another Tim Black type call with the Donna Brazil story.
Why, is he going to call in?
I hope so.
What makes you think he's going to call in?
I don't think he is, but I think that he's going to try.
Is it true that Jimmy Dore is doing live shows now?
I've heard that
Does
rumor.
he take phone calls?
I have no idea.
That would be fun.
That would be pretty fun. Hello, Jimmy. This is Sam from Bayonne.
I mean, people are aware that I used to have a problem calling into right-wing talk radio shows on the radio. And, but it's a different era. It's a different era. And it might be, I don't know, might be my new.
What is it going to take to have peace with Jimmy? What's it going to take?
I know it's not a question of peace. It's just I'm
Question
critical
of
of what he's doing. I mean, he's
I understand.
He's found his bone again, and he's gotten hundreds of thousands of hits on his latest round of Clinton videos. I'm hoping the thing that I actually like about this Donna Brazil thing, and to a large extent, what she's outlining was a story that was already reported back in that summer, which is fine. I think what she found was that there was a specific contract set up, and I think to the extent that the Clinton campaign had sign off on who the personnel was going to be at the DNC, I think is probably greater than people understood. But the story of people call it money laundering is one that we knew and we spoke about. And but the best part about this with the Donna Brazil thing is that my hope is, with all due respect, that it will basically quiet. It's a sense that the establishment of the party is moving on from the Clintons. And presumably, right? Like, I mean, presumably, I give the benefit of the doubt that the reason why there's such concern over, remaining concern over the Clinton folk is that there's some deep-seated fear that she's going to run for election again in 2020.
That is terrifying. But do you think that
But I hope this
where did
puts
this
that
perception grow, including, among some really smart people or, avid news consumers, that the DNC is so powerful? Because I think that's the other thing that comes up in these conversations, the notion that there's some type of
the
Illuminati.
DNC could be,
but they're certainly not.
But we are aware of everything that they were doing.
Right.
I mean,
and when we have all these emails, and it's like sometimes there's emails that sound tacky, sometimes there's emails that sound borderline unethical or straight up unethical, but there's nothing like there's this general agreement, which is a problem.
The biggest thing that they did, yes, that agreement was gross, but that's actually not, that is because the DNC was so weak.
Was totally broke.
The DNC was more than broke. It was significantly in debt from the Obama years, largely because apparently it was just like a trough for a bunch of consultants. I hope all these consultants get fired too from this.
Well, I think
And
that's
from
the thing
the
that
Obama-
Perez has been. That's another reason why I think Ellison mattered in terms of Perez, because a lot of this is protecting those consultants. And
I think that's
disgusting.
true. I think that's true. And this is a function of how weak the DNC was. The biggest thing the DNC did in terms of taking any action that was supposedly supposed to help Hillary Clinton was limiting the debates. Maybe it did help her. Maybe it didn't. I think, there was reason to believe that the longer that when there were debates, she did better in terms of her numbers than not. But it definitely it hurt. What also it did is it created a vacuum that Donald Trump filled. If the Democrats had been debating earlier and more often, it would have not allowed this huge industry that grew up around Donald Trump to be as massive as it was. There was a huge, in that summer, I remember this, there was a huge vacuum of political news, and Donald Trump stepped into it.
It's totally true, but even if they were, wonky debates between Bernie and Hillary are never going to get as much attention as his rallies.
I think that's true when you think about the fall. But if you think about the summer, one debate they would have focused on it.
If they went pound for pound like that,
I think it was a mistake. And I
think Bernie should have gone out and done a little, just like, and by the way, I thought it was pathetic, sad, lying Hillary Clinton, lying Hillary.
Well, the funny part is
that
during that time, it was O'Malley who said that they were rigging it, and Bernie wouldn't say anything, because in the summer of 2015, Bernie still thought he was running a message campaign,
right? And somehow O'Malley thought he was running an anything campaign.
Well, do you remember?
Like irony of ironies. Yeah.
Do you remember in the spring of 2015?
The Politico reporter?
Yeah. I don't remember. Do you remember what the guy's name was?
The reporter?
Yeah.
No.
Some reporter called. Didn't he come through you or something?
He contacted me.
Oh, I don't remember.
I honestly have no memory.
A reporter called me in the spring of 2015, and he's like, I've been doing this piece on Martin O'Malley. And Martin O'Malley wants to know how he can get the attention of progressives away from Elizabeth Warren and on him. And I'm like, Elizabeth Warren? She's not running. He's got to worry about Bernie Sanders. And the guy literally laughed. And he said, you don't really think that that the Democrats are going to elect a socialist?
I wish I could remember this guy's name.
I do too.
Oh, he was so stupid.
And I was like, dude, are you serious? This is where the energy is in this party. And he thought it was a joke. And I said, you go back. You want to tell Martin O'Malley something? You tell him to pay attention to Bernie Sanders. You got that message a little late.
You could also tell Martin O'Malley, dude, don't embarrass yourself.
Right. I would go
Run for Senate or
yeah.
something. Jesus Christ.
I love Sarah Palin. The idea has to be pushed and repeated over and over again. The current system is radical. When is Donald Jr. going to go to jail? I think there's a good chance that Donald Trump is the leaker. I think you mentioned this the other day. In an investigation like this, apparently, each subject gets a number, right? I think they were up to like 200 or 300 people that are interviewed or whatnot. The grand juries indict people, and they seal these indictments. There are 3 other sealed indictments at this point. We don't know who it is. They're sealed, but we're just at the beginning.
I'm rooting for Kushner over Don Jr.
You know what? Here's the beauty.
That's my rooting.
You don't have to
be
make
all
a choice.
the above. Oh, love it.
You don't have to make that choice.
I wonder if they'll snag Mike Flint Jr. just to put pressure on him.
Dad,
you arrested me. And statutory rape still isn't legal. Trump administration is a total failure.
Oh, God. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Yes. Who's this?
Hey, this is Tim from New Paltz. How you guys doing?
Tim, I'm doing well. What's on your mind?
I had a quick thing to say about yesterday's interview, actually. Well, not exactly about it, but related. about African sort of revitalization on the ground, basically.
Yep.
Sort of a rejection of imperialism. A couple years ago, I was doing field work, and I lived in Madagascar for several months, and you could see the generational divide between people who were roughly my age, early mid-20s, completely sort of rejecting the idea that they needed to rely on outside investment and interference from the West and also from China in their case to rebuild their economy. And it perfectly correlated with what was going on in that interview yesterday. And what I thought was interesting when I was actually on the ground there was they inherently distrusted these big corporations. A lot of these Chinese companies come in and they log forests or they dig up gems and minerals, and none of that gets actually passed on to local people. But they also had a lot of problems with the U.S. in terms of the Peace Corps, because, and I got a hand of this myself, U.S. Peace Corps people who have never done any farming in their lives, people who, had a garden at home, would be sent to tell people who've been farming their entire lives that they're bad at growing rice and you should be growing rice this way, even though they read a pamphlet about it and have never done that method before. So when they showed them a new method and it failed, they were like, well, what is the point of any of this? It's a huge waste of time. It was just an absolute, they saw it as like insulting and a sort of a soft imperialism.
Why would that be insulting to have someone who doesn't know anything about farming come tell you that they know more about farming because they're from America?
Right. Like this guy's an 80-year-old farming forever. Some 21-year-old is going to tell you that you're not supposed to grow rice.
You there?
Hey, is that a little better?
Yeah, your phone
I
is
don't need
breaking
to
up.
tell you your business, but you need to work on your phone better.
Yeah.
Sorry
we have
about that.
a pamphlet for that, which we put together.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'll get a Peace Corps guy to show me how to use it.
Not a bad idea.
But it was interesting.
Well, I appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I have one really quick thing. Do you think that I can take it off the air, the answer to this. Do you think that Americans have gotten better at not freaking out over terrorist attacks and just signing away all of our rights immediately? Because I've noticed that people are a lot less panicky about this car attack in Manhattan than I feel like they have been.
I mean,
other attacks.
Yeah, I'll ask. I'll answer that off. I'll let you go. I mean, I think I've.
All right, thanks so much.
I think there is. There's definitely no less panic than might have been the case years ago. But I mean, look, just like 3 months ago, right? There was that drunk guy who drove into Times Square. Do you remember this? He killed one person, I think. And the bottom line is, regardless of why this guy told himself he was doing this, if there is no greater plot, right? If there's nobody who's like, if there's no greater organization, if there's no significant conspiracy, if there's no engine other than, YouTube that is pushing people to do this, then I think the feeling is like it is a reality that we have to live with when you're in a situation where there's, large amounts of people. I mentioned I had talked to Digby about this on Ring of Fire, and she reminded me, and I remembered this event. I think I was out in L.A. at the time. An old man who apparently maybe he was a little bit drunk, I'm not sure. Killed, I don't know, half a dozen people in a open-air market in Venice. Drove right through it. They put up pylons. You obviously you can't do that again. But frankly, the Vegas thing is more scary in some ways because it's easily replicated, and you could take out. What scares me and what's going to be really scary is if this guy gets out of that van and has a semi-automatic weapon, there would have been dozens of people killed.
I mean, you just kind of have to shut off that part of your brain after a while, I think, right?
I mean, I think so, because there's really nothing. But the point is, like, there's nothing. It's not like, oh, we're leaving potential solutions on the table. The reality is that this is going to be part of our reality going forward. Frankly, I was shocked in the early aughts that nothing else happened in New York City. Because if you had gone in January of 2002 into Macy's with a stick of dynamite and walked up to the perfume counter and blew up the perfume counter, half of New York City would have emptied out. People were on edge. Anything would have had an incredible sort of terror impact. Now, not so much. I mean, maybe you start seeing bombs, but I think people just know, like, look, a car is limited in what it can do. It's horrific, but it's limited.
Although this is, I keep talking about it, this is kind of the new strategy that they've outlined for how they're going to do these sort of attacks. And, one of the converse point, and even though they haven't really done this, and hopefully they won't, in this, some of these, like I think it was a 2014 strategy document that ISIS wrote about this sort of thing. The other kind of point is that when Al Qaeda did those types of attacks, you also knew that, like, if you're not in a major destination, then you probably, like, nothing's going to happen in some, like, random city in Iowa or something. And the whole point that they're kind of trying to focus on now is, like, anywhere, anytime, it's
right.
a possibility. And it's just this kind of general degradation of life and security.
Yeah, the attacks in Paris really fucked me up for that reason, because I'm not the kind of person who hangs out in Times Square. But, these are people who live there going about their Friday night and, like.
Well, that's my point. That attack in Paris was coordinated with multiple cells of people, and these guys had gotten training and whatnot. And there was a real reason to suspect, and I think it's borne out, that they're being, there's a larger machine behind them. This isn't just a random individual waking up one day and saying, like, I'm going to do this in 6 months. And that's what is much scarier. That would be far scarier because theoretically, right, we have an apparatus that would catch that type of planning. There's nothing you're going to develop that is going to catch someone who decides to go rent a car at Home Depot, get it from New Jersey, drive across the George Washington Bridge, go down the West Side Highway, and then just careen off. I mean, he had done it all within an hour after renting the car.
Although what's odd is that, I mean, it is another case where this is a guy who the FBI talked to a couple years ago. And it's like, I don't mean this in any sort of conspiratorial sense, but it's like, how many relationships are there going to be? And there's a lot in the attackers in the UK have had relationships with intelligence services. And it's like, when you combine that with the fact that the FBI has this history of kind of entrapping disturbed young people, it's just like...
Well, here's the problem.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, is that because of the vastness of the scope of what they're doing, they can't necessarily find...
They're making the haystack bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
And that's the policy. And that's why it should be about subtracting and paring down. Like, it's not only a major human rights abuse to surveil these communities like this. It's stupid from a security perspective.
The only potential link, and they may find more, but Rukmini Callimachi, I think she's a reporter for the Times, maybe. She covers ISIS. She had a thread where she was talking about this aspect that what this guy did was literally straight out of the handbook of ISIS. They tell you to, have a knife or a gun in the car. He had knives. They said, write a note. He wrote a note. They said get the car, they rent the car, don't talk to anybody, blah, blah, all of this. And they no longer put these things on YouTube because YouTube pulls them down too quickly. Apparently there's like a chat room. Chat rooms in this app, Telegram, that you can only enter into if you've been given a key. It's like an invite. And only someone already in the chat room can give you an invite. So presumably everybody in that chat room are already supporters of ISIS. The question is how would he get that key? How was that connection made? What is that connection? So I don't know. I guess time will tell. We'll see more in the future. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam.
Yeah.
Michael from Pennsylvania.
Michael from Pennsylvania.
So I'm going to be your first Donna Brazil caller of the day. Hope that's okay. You there?
Yes. What did you think of the piece? I assume you read it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to push back against with you and side more with the dum-dums on this one. This is really bad.
It's bad.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, like, the concept of rigging, when people say rigging, I mean changing votes.
Right.
But as far as dirty of a trick as you can pull, this is pretty much it. I mean, this is not a Democratic Party. It's not what it looks like. And I have to say one of the issues that you touched on briefly, but to me it's really the animating principle is who's getting paid. And it's this Obama-Clinton axis of consultants who are draining the party dry. And one of the major points that I was completely shocked to read was they violated the Democratic Party bylaws to take a $2 million loan. And Donna Brazil was on the executive committee. She didn't know about it.
Yes.
And who are they spending that money on? I mean, to me, this is like bordering on criminal kind of activity.
I think there's arguably, I think these people, if they violated their own charters, I think it's actionable on some level, right? I mean, because there are fiduciary responsibilities you have if you're a union. I don't know what like the DNC is classified as. Maybe it's just like a private corporation, but there's I would think that like somebody could sue based upon on that.
Sue everybody.
Well, and you read this and you just see how much of a saint Bernie is. And I don't want to build the cult of personality around Bernie too much, but it's pretty clear that he knew that this stuff was going on.
Yep.
But he found the idea of losing to a Republican was so bad, he was just going to bite his tongue.
Right.
And these fucking assholes
around.
are still bitching about him, like not giving her enough. And she has the temerity to write in her stupid book that he wasn't as classy to her as she was to Obama, when Bernie is staying in the campaign being like, I hope she has a good minimum wage position. Go back 8 years prior. Why would I drop out? This is around the time that Bobby Kennedy got shot in the fucking head.
Right.
Anybody? Anybody?
Right.
Right. And I read, because I'm more involved in state level politics, I see the stuff of them laundering money through the state parties. And when people say launder money, what they're doing is they're having people exceed the maximum contribution limit to the party.
Well,
to an individual campaign, rather.
I can't remember what the case was, but you're allowed to give something like, I can't remember, $100 or $1,000 per 300 districts or whatever it is. That's why the maximum was the 352 or whatever it was. But it has to go to the DNC, but the DNC can then, or it goes to the states then can transfer it to the DNC, and the DNC can then just basically spend it as when essentially the Clinton campaign is in charge of the DNC, can spend it as the Clinton campaign wants. And that's why they call it money laundering, because it's getting around the limitations that people can give directly to the campaign.
And it's not just that, it's the timing of that. This agreement was made in March of 2015.
Right.
So this is not like, okay, she's now the Democratic nominee
Right.
and, you know, the president takes over the party and it's, you know, da-da-da-da-da. This was the DNC is beholden to Hillary Clinton because it owes $20 million in debt, which the executive committee didn't know about. Only Debbie Wasserman Schultz did.
Yeah.
And then to say, well, you're over a barrel, we need to have control. And they had complete control of the DNC, including right of refusal on any public statements that the DNC made.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's fair to say that the DNC rigged it and that Bernie was and Martin O'Malley, as funny as his campaign was, it's important that we actually have a primary in the Democratic Party. This is a party that's supposed to represent the people. I mean, this is beyond the pale to me, and I don't think anyone involved should be a part of the Democratic Party anymore. This is bad, really bad. And these same people, those are the Perez people. That's what the Perez v. Ellison fight was over. It was keeping those people who had indebted the party $20 million and put it in their own pocket, keep them in control, and that's what happened. Ellison represented the reformers who wanted to do things openly and show you where they're spending the money, and that the executive committee, who has the bylaw authority to determine what they're doing
Well,
with
now
our
we
money.
now we know why the Obama people were so keen on having their person in there. Right?
Because it was that's their job. They're getting paid.
Well, it's not just that they're getting
That's what
it's
is.
not just that they're getting paid. I think they didn't want this stuff to come out. I mean, it's sort of shocking that Donna Brazile is doing this publicly.
I am, first of all, people hitting on Donna Brazile at this point. Listen, she fucked up by sending the Flint debate question to Hillary. But this, in my mind, overawes any of that.
I think that
This
also
is
underlies
really
how
important.
little of a deal that was, frankly. Sorry. That was nothing.
But
this is important.
Let me ask
That
you
was
this.
nothing.
I mean, look, there's no doubt the DNC was in the bag for the Clinton campaign. In fact, it's now just seems like the DNC was an extension of the Clinton campaign.
Beyond that, though.
All right, an extension of the Clinton campaign. And then there's a lot of arguably, if not criminality, stuff that you could get sued for without a doubt, right? Because they went against their own
ethically, this
yes.
is just disgusting. Maybe they finagled the rules just enough to keep it legal strictly.
Do you think it would have
But as
made
far
a
as
difference,
ethics
though?
go-
Do you think it would have made a difference?
Well, I mean, that's like a separate question.
Right.
And
Well,
to me,
no,
it's not
it isn't
actually
in
that
terms
important.
of the rigged thing. That's the
It
point.
isn't, though, because it's like hypothetical, Sam. Like, if Hillary didn't have every superdelegate lined up and the DNC in the bag and $1 billion and we had actually
She would have had
a
every
Democratic campaign
superdelegate
based on
lined up.
ideas,
She would have had every superdelegate lined up, even if there wasn't that.
which is why they shouldn't exist.
Well, yes, but that's a separate question. That's a separate question. She was coming in.
But it was also using
as,
the persuasion point, Sam. Like, oh, she
Yes.
already got 700 superdelegates.
Of course.
No one else can win.
Of course.
Give up.
That's exactly what they
And-
said too when Obama ran. That Clinton had all the superdelegates. But the superdelegates the
She learned her
superdelegates.
lesson, though. She was better in 2016 than in 2008. She left too much space, so she went a year ahead of time.
Right.
And got the DNC to be part of her campaign.
Yes.
I mean, that's rigging it. Obama overcame that, but he didn't overcome that. He didn't overcome that level of sophistication and that level of rigging.
But the delegates
Like,
had
just
nothing
because-
to do
and
with
just
that
because Obama
deal.
did it
Wait.
doesn't mean
But
it's okay.
Michael, did the delegates have anything to do with that deal that she made with the DNC?
Okay, no, but
All
they represent the same class of people. You know, these and people feared Hillary Clinton because she was doing stuff like controlling the DNC. So they fell in line. even
Donna
if they didn't agree
Brazile
with
supposedly didn't even know about it, and she sat on the board.
Well, there's the technical knowing about the deal, and then there's the fear of Hillary Clinton's wrath that kept everybody in line, too.
Of course, yes. But
But it's distracting. But it distracts one more point, and then, you can we can keep talking if you want. But it's just the other thing that I thought was important was how shitty Obama is at being a leader.
Horrible.
That
And
really
we knew
pissed
this
me off.
too. I mean,
Oh, fuck you, white boy.
but Obama really gutted the DNC and left Debbie Wasserman Schultz there.
Destroyed the party.
Because of her incompetence.
Oh.
I was trying to prove a point about Jewish intelligence. Not quite so good after all, huh?
Point proven.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz is dumb as fuck. Everybody's running around like, ooh, the Jews are so special.
She was.
Maybe you played dreidels in the cave you were inbreeding in, but you were still in the cave.
It's not he left her there despite the fact that she was incompetent. He left her there because she was incompetent and didn't want the DNC to be any type of rival to
You ever see Trading Places?
I did.
Same thing what I was doing. It was a bet that Valerie Jarrett and I had about Debbie Wasserman Schultz running the DNC.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, this is not just a Clinton thing; it's an Obama-Clinton thing. You have to discharge Obama people at this point too.
I agree.
They represent the same people, and a lot of people don't like that because they personally like Obama. But the reality is, he's the one who designed the system, let it happen, and orchestrated this all with Clinton. And the thing is, our party is ethically challenged at this point and can't be used to accomplish change in its current form. And that's something that's hard for me to say, but I see this problem happening at the state level and the local level too, because there's no guidance from the top, nothing keeping people on the ethical straight and narrow, and it's just grifters and useless people. You know, that was that Third Way article I called in yesterday with when Michael was on about, and it's the same shit. They're going to lead us down the path of losing to Trump, which I was worried about since 2015. I thought he was the odds-on favorite. Unfortunately, he won. And it's not because I'm a genius, but it's because these Democratic Party is completely corrupt and the people know it, and they're right. And something has got to change.
Appreciate the call.
Can I make
See ya.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I make two more general points to this? You brought up the analogy of Bernie versus Hillary to Hillary versus Obama, and I don't think those really are analogous situations. I don't think Obama was all that threatening to the larger sources of power that were arrayed behind Hillary this time around. Also, I think when people get mad at the DNC for what they see as a rigged process, they're also mad at a lot of other organizations and sort of, I don't know what to call them, but these power sources that are not the DNC. The DNC is just a part of it, like the coalition that lined up behind Hillary this time. And this is not shady. This is just the way things are. It consists of Silicon Valley, Hollywood, Wall Street, transnational firms, like corporate media, like a lot of very powerful people. And it feels unfair because it is unfair, but it doesn't mean that there had to be any foul play.
Right.
But that doesn't make it okay.
Right. Right.
But there was foul play.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, it's one thing if those groups just spontaneously supported Hillary, but they have actively they hijacked the party to make it part of her campaign, which is not how it's supposed to work.
I mean, combined with whatever the DNC did, like there was no stopping any of it.
Appreciate the phone call, Mike.
Oh, so I can't rig campaigns now? Sexism 101. That was like when I
Hillary
supported
Clinton
the coup in
became-
Honduras. What did you say about that then, Sam? You tried to silence my voice from supporting a military junta, say?
I can see. Okay. Let's go to the IMs here. Sorry. Phony shrimp. Does Majority Report coffee TM restore my male vitality? And if so, how much lead does it have?
Decreases it.
Jonathan Armistead. Just a reminder, World Series ended yesterday. Donald Trump became the first president not to throw out a pitch in his first term during opening day, All-Star game, or World Series since Ronald Reagan only missed opening day because he'd just been shot. What's he trying to hide? Joseph Ballin. The Manhattan attack was shoot only once. He wasn't filled up with bullets. Global Research has a good article about the false flag attack that happened in Manhattan. Link at the bottom. What? Oh, it was false flag. False flag. They let him live because of the false flag.
Uzbekis don't speak good English, so when he was exposing the false flag, no one would understand what he was saying.
Paul Marchand. Hey, guys, Jimmy is claiming that YouTube is actively unsubscribing people from his channel and making it more difficult for people to check out his videos. Do you think it's bullshit? Anyway, this is the final M of the day, so F you forever. Love you guys. YouTube, he must know this because I learned this from TYT. YouTube culls fake bots from subscribers. If you have fake accounts that are set up, they call it. So we went through this. We go through this periodically where you get like, we had days, you know, right now we're on track. Like we add 1,000+ subscribers a week, excuse me. But we had days over the summer where we had net negative because they get rid of fake accounts. But this is not a, this has been something that's been going on for years. And I know this because TYT told me. Maybe they just don't talk to him.
Maybe Tim Black should call in and set you straight.
Vocal Fryer. Jamie, I've been wanting to ask you how you square Matt Taibbi's alleged misogyny and confessed regrets with your posing for a hipster nudie site during the same time frame. Do you also think you played a part in objectifying women? I think that's a dumb question, but let's ask Jamie.
Yeah, that is a dumb question.
Hey, look, white people are all disgusting. Can't make a distinction. Taibbi, Weinstein, Jamie. Same motherfucking thing. It's disgusting white people writing disgusting things, masturbating into ficuses, and showing their titties. They all need to go back in caves.
Contagious Chameleon. Good to keep it vague. Pacman got his Amazon link canceled. What do you think of the Justice Democrats merging with all of us? They're announcing a candidate tonight to run against Feinstein. Oh, I didn't realize.
I think who is the guy? There's a real candidate running against Feinstein, though. The president of the New York State of the California Senate is running against her. So that's a. I mean, he's pretty progressive. So I don't know who they're getting behind, but there is already somebody who.
I have an idea who it's going to be.
You think it's going to be Jimmy Dore's girlfriend?
Can they functionally replace the DNC? I don't know if you can functionally replace the DNC, but I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens because, I mean, I would imagine, you know, Donna Brazile, it's weird, Donna Brazile coming out and saying this. This is going to be interesting to see if there's like other sort of party luminaries because she's like, to me, the most democratic of like.
She's the most serious, like, I think that's the most like identifiable pure Democrat.
Honestly, it's the most surprising thing about the story that it has her byline.
Yeah, but I do recall, and I mean, maybe I have too much objectivity or I'm too fair to like establishment Democrats or whatever. But like, I remember actually, even though I thought that telling the questions to Hillary was what she shouldn't have done it, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. But I was surprised because I remember from her TV hits during the primaries, she was one of the only people who I would genuinely say was like relatively down the middle. She would always come out and, you know, she would praise Hillary, but she would always say that Bernie was doing great and that the party needed to listen to him and move in his direction. I mean, it doesn't seem, if you were actually looking at her with a bit of objectivity, that shocking.
JGM, hey, MR, we have our preliminary results for our first MR poll. We're finishing weighing the results now. Sample size is 677, well within the range of professional pollsters. Election's rapidly approaching, so just be warned, if we email you the results before the election, try to post them fast. I'll include some text that can accompany the following spreadsheet, and you can copy and paste to form a blog post. Okay. I think it's real. I think they are doing some crowdfunding. I mean, we'll see. Just look, do us a favor, all right? Because I'm not fully sure I even understand what it is that you're talking about. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I just don't know but from what I gather, you have done some type of like online or crowdsourcing of what you anticipate we're going to see in terms of Virginia turnout. And the election's obviously Tuesday. Today's Thursday. Okay, so we will post it, but please, like, put in the, the stuff that this is an experiment by listeners of the Majority Report to see if this is it's like a test pilot to see if, this is a valid way of trying to predict outcomes. Let's just do that, okay? Because I don't want to put it out there like it's we've commissioned some type of poll, but I want to give you an opportunity to have it published so that in the event that it does work, you guys can say, look, see here. So we'll see. Nick the Liberal, I'm struggling with the transactionalism in politics. Dora's problem is complete rejection of transactionalism. I understand we have to compromise sometimes, like when Clinton won the nomination. My fear is not so that Clinton returns, but that we get a Booker or a Harris next time. I don't think I can hang in with the Dems if they do that again. I mean, look, who is the candidate that you're interested in? I mean, there's a lot. Look, I don't know who those people are. Wormtown Lefty, will there be a test on this Donna Brazil thing? And more importantly, can someone leak the answers to me? But good on her for this, really. It's whether it's ideology or pragmatism, it still helps the left, and left is best. Custer Killer, Jimmy did like a 25-minute video spewing Sean Hannity talking points about the Mueller investigation, talking about how innocent Trump really is, basically asking why Clinton didn't get arrested or is being investigated. There won't be any indictments because Trump isn't corrupt like Obama. He went on to say everybody needed to make sure they're subscribed, even though he's aware that people aren't getting notifications for his show anymore because YouTube's doing everything in its power to shut him down and demonetize his videos for bringing people the truth. Then he topped it off by finishing video whining about the FBI getting the mainstream media to shame him for asking about an open murder investigation. What?
All right, I don't know about all of that, but I will say, in the interest of moving
just
forward,
playing with it? Yeah,
I feel like people might be playing, but in the interest of moving forward and building a sort of broad consensus position, if there's some type of grand bargain where we could send Hillary to Guantanamo in exchange for like single pay or something, I am willing to negotiate that.
Well, it's on the table.
Right.
Everything's on the table.
I'm totally down.
Shefla.
It'd be great if the Clintons had to flee to like Dubai, like Benazir Bhutto. That'd be fucking awesome.
It's
If Trump delivers on any of his campaign promises, I hope it's that one.
Did they lock her up?
Yeah.
If Trump had a day where he's like, I just want to be clear, I'm not totally racist in a certain sense. We're gonna do one of the things that I said about healthcare. That was nice, and the Clintons are getting deported.
Look,
I'd give him
a lot of people.
A day of higher
a lot of
priorities.
people are skeptical about Donald Trump, but with the help of Jim Baker, I want to try and just make the argument that there's some very positive traits that Trump has been exhibiting lately, not the least of which that he got rid of Anthony Scaramucci. Actually, that is my least favorite thing that he did. But here is Jim Baker interviewing Steve Strang, who is from Charisma. Is this right? Charisma Magazine.
Lori and I are on the advisory council. We don't talk about that a whole lot, but he has so many of us, and it's people like Billy Graham's daughter.
And Graham Watts.
Yeah. He has so many pastors and preachers on his advisory boards, his spiritual advisory board, that they all can't come to meet at one time. Dr. Don Colbert and Mary are on advisory board.
Yeah.
Well, they go to a different meeting than we go to because the boards are so big.
And it's growing. I mean, more and more and more and more and more.
Pause it for 1 second. So Jim Baker, does he go to the special former convict leaders, evangelical leader one?
It's a big meeting, too.
The redeemed one.
There's a lot of people in that meeting.
One, right.
I support
and
people
of course
putting
we've
their
got to
lives
bring
back together again, and going from hookers to buckets.
Right. Bringing. They don't have the room because the food buckets take up a lot of the space at his meeting. All right, good.
So this is so interesting, and people say, "How can you endorse Donald Trump as a Christian?" Did you ever hear anybody ask you that question?
Well, they haven't asked that specific question, but you know, whether or not he's a Christian is between him and God.
That's right.
It's not for all of us to judge him.
Pause
Now,
it.
yes, or
And just be clear on why that's the case. It's because he's white.
Only God can judge me.
But when he's black, then, of course, you can judge his Christianity. But that's
Oh,
because
black people
there's
are dangerous.
prima facie evidence that he might be Muslim because of the skin color. But continue.
Right.
it's not for all of us to judge
Yeah.
him. Now, yes, there are things in his life, you know, that we've talked about before that we don't approve of, but you don't hear those things in the last 10 years. And his language has improved better. And remember that guy that he appointed, Scaramucci?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Who had a quote and said some really vile things. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes.
He got rid of him.
That's right.
Now, we can only speculate why, but my personal opinion is that that interview was part of it, and he just decided he didn't want his key people talking like that in public.
That's right.
Yeah, the idea of using profanity or something, just not
disgusting.
going to work.
Just
totally disgusting.
horrible.
Have you
Trying
seen how
to show
Ivanka
the
looks
kids.
in that dress?
I'm
Oh
just
my
trying
God.
to show the kids. And I don't want Scaramucci around here.
I'd love to see
saying those
Scaramucci's reaction to that. Like,
Yeah. Oh, so now
I'm the
gonna
one guy?
So now I'm getting criticized by some fucking scamsters on some Christian TV station. They need to learn how to make fucking money on Wall Street.
Let's go to the phone to call him from a 330 area code. Who's this?
Hold on a sec. Let me come out of Metro. This is Paulie. Okay, no, I'm lying. This is George. I'm calling from Northern Virginia. This is the first time I've had a chance to call you guys.
Okay.
You there?
Yeah. Who is this?
Okay. This is George, calling from Northern Virginia.
Richard, stop.
Come on.
Stop it.
Come on, let's
Stop.
go.
Stop. Get to the fucking point.
Oh, man. You guys won't even let me do this.
Dude, you got to at least do a
slide.
slight impression.
Yeah, you need to make some effort.
Oh, so in other words, if I do freaking Gorka, you'll be happy. But if I just normally talk like a normal American from the middle of the country.
Well, why did you have to change your name?
Virginia's not the middle of the country. You're from
Why
Ohio.
couldn't you say it's Richard from Virginia and then go?
Because I had an entire bit, dude, but that's blown now. So I'll just ask you a simple question.
What
I
part?
mean,
Wait.
ultimately,
What part of your bit was contingent upon your name being George?
I wanted to ask you about the possibilities of what would happen to George when, whether he should follow the cops and the wire that he'd done for Don, or whether he should roll back over just and get executed by Don.
You were going to
and
be
his-
George
his various
Papadopoulos. Oh, okay.
should have had a Greek accent.
Now you
You
get
should have been
got
like,
it.
this
All
is
right.
a Georgia.
He doesn't have a Greek
That's what you
accent.
should have
He's
done.
just as much of a
You should have been like, where is my ouzo? What is that? Is that what?
Ouzo,
Greeks,
yeah.
Greeks drink that. That's what you should have done. You got to telegraph jokes.
Sorry, I just broke a plate
Yeah,
on my head
the
and I
truth
was
comes
dancing.
out. If I'm not.
By the way,
being
there's no one
obvious
I
enough,
hate
you
more
guys
than
won't
crooked
pick it up.
Hillary than you fucking Greeks. This is a George.
Well, you know
That's
what?
what you do.
The whole point was to point out that there are many similarities now between Big Don and Tony Soprano. I mean, you got the two hot daughters. You got the goofy.
He didn't have two
other
daughters.
kids.
You have an Anthony Jr. who is not a hot. Even in your comedy routine of pranking phone calls, you'll make no fucking sense, Richard. Get over our lines.
It's not what
This is
Greek
George.
people sound like at all.
This is a George. This is a George. I am Donald Trump campaign surrogacy who do the meeting with Vladimir Putin. And now this
All right, I'm
motherfucker
gonna
is
bail.
ruining the fun half with his relentless unfunny phone calls. You know, at least some of our other irritating callers are unintentionally funny at times.
God, man, you guys are really harsh today. I'm going to hang up. Gotta jump.
Gotta jump.
All right, there you go. All right.
Richard, get in a hobby.
Sorry, Richard.
Get in a hobby.
That was
Get in a hobby.
Well, it's because he introduced himself as someone other than George. Yeah. And then he said, "Oh wait, no, it's George."
He's grown on me.
No, he's grown on me too.
I love the Greek accent you do. Like honestly,
it's just
like
horrible.
that's like one like
I'm
if
trying
if
to-
you saw
Yeah.
like even like pre Sid Caesar, people would be like,
who is Sid Caesar?
they'd be like, wow, that's not, back like when it was like Italians were really
Italians are very
exotic in this country.
They come from the Moors. They are so far away.
Do you like drink water in cups there, or? Shefflet, Sam, if in your opinion, if you're a betting man, who would you say out of the entire Trump cabinet is actually going to do some real time? Well, it's impossible to know who's actually going to do some real time, but I would say that I think Kushner is going down.
Oh, no.
And I think Flynn has probably flipped. And I think I think there's some other people, lower level people, but I think Kushner is going to be the big one.
They say that Jews never go to jail, but both you and your
Don
dad.
Jr. might too.
You and your dad. I don't care about him. Fuck him.
Kevin, 11-7-21. Trump USDA pick withdraws. Yes. How come nobody mentioned the fact that our blue state gun regulations kept this guy from killing dozens more? Stepped out of his rent-a-truck with a pellet gun, not a machine gun. Why does anybody but Cult of Bernie members think the DNC would support a guy who attacked the DCN even after he joined over a woman who donated to the DNC for decades and stumped for down ticket candidates? Bernie didn't help the Dems. He wasn't a Dem. He just tried to use the DNC for his benefit, a party crasher.
No normal person cares about that sort of thing. Sorry to say, but also the DNC allowed him to run. They've not even informally, for at least since the late 1990s, the guy is functionally a Democrat in Vermont. They never run candidates against him, and he has actually raised a lot of money for Democratic candidates.
There was nothing obligated state Democratic parties from allowing him on the ballot, except for the fact that they knew that they couldn't get away without doing that because so many Democrats wanted him on the ballot.
So this whole and again, I don't know. I get maybe it's a generational thing, but there's just no normal person out there that cares.
Just called you old. Just called you old.
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I have not met anybody, and I should say in real life, I've literally not met anybody of any age or background that actually is like, my real problem is that he won't change his party registration.
Well, this isn't that fake of life. This isn't that fraudulent. I just don't think there's
I'm not saying it's fraudulent.
Voters.
I'm saying it's a very bizarre issue set of concerns, especially to bring up on the same day that Donna Brazile has written about.
It's not
is a very sleazy deal.
Donna Brazile is about as Democratic partisan as you can get.
Exactly.
Literally sat on the board and is talking about what I think would constitutes, I don't know if it's a legal activity. I don't know, but it certainly seems to be. I think there's grounds for someone like her to sue.
Right. And also, by the way, Bernie, why would he hurt his personal brand and toxify it by joining an organization that's less popular than him? He's loaning his incredibly popular individual brand to a toxic brand. Anyways.
They should be grateful. I mean, we saw this with the people who were mad about him being included in the women's convention as well. And I actually do know some of these people, not too well, but they are real. They're still very hung up on Bernie as an individual and on individual personalities rather than the grassroots movements that they represent. They think he's out for himself. They have this bizarre caricature of him as
maybe a little
egotistical man.
If you've dedicated your life worshiping two of the most narcissistic politicians
that is
ever.
Also true. But he's if anything, he's doing it for all of us.
He's totally out for himself. Completely unethical. Yes, I will do that fundraiser at Tyson Chicken. That would be great. That guy he just doesn't think about anybody. Got to execute a retarded black guy? No problem.
Bingo. Bistolba. I served 2 years with the Peace Corps in Honduras, and the volunteers taught only farmers who were interested in sustainable farming, unlike America's toxically stupid agricultural industry. Fart face. You don't think the DNC putting all the southern states' primaries near the beginning helped Hillary more than the debates? I would say this to you, that you don't understand how primary dates are formed. It is not up to the DNC to change the dates. The parties do that in the states themselves. So when California decided to move their primary, it wasn't the DNC office that instructed them to do that. I would imagine they don't want that to happen. See, that is the fart face. That is what I think is sort of problematic. Is like when people are like, the DNC controls everything. The DX fool. Ola Campesinos, happy centennial of the Soviet Union. Anyway, KPFK Radio in LA, the original home of Democracy Now!, is having their 58th anniversary party November 9th at Skateland in Northridge, California. Special guests include Greg Palast, Jimmy Dore, who hosts his own show live Mondays at 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, the Pacifica station now no longer airs Brad Friedman's The Broadcast Weekly. Oh, and any comments about Bernie Sanders' appearance on Seth Meyers' show Monday night? Didn't see it. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, I'm Mark Crew. Can someone please describe the look of disappointment on Matt's sagacious face when it was explained to him that the Jackson Kush plan has nothing to do with sucking back dank-ass fatty rim rocker bong rips? Is the state of Jackson cooperative?
This is the first time hearing about that.
The Jackson Kush was the basically the plan that was put together for Jackson, Mississippi. And he was saying that when you heard Jackson Kush, that you immediately thought it was some type of
I get the joke.
strain.
Way to listen. Way to listen.
Left is
Great job.
left is preferable. The farmers market incident in Santa Monica was in Santa Monica, not Venice. It was an elderly man who mistook the accelerator for a brake. He killed 9 people. I had been there early that day, just got home with my produce when I heard about the incident. Sorry, 10 people killed, not 9. A simple. Donna Brazil didn't tell us much we didn't know. The info coming from her lends some credibility, but only because she was part of the organization causing the problem. She is no friend to progressives. Donna and the other officers played direct roles in undermining the Sanders campaign. It wasn't just the money funneling. That being said, I don't believe Sanders lost because of Donna, Debbie, or the DNC, but Donna is no friend of progressives. I agree. I don't see this any more than her trying to sell a new book. Get your pre-orders now. Josh from Houston, but she cried after she hung up. The piece is so melodramatic. I don't think I've ever read anything quite like this.
Oh, it's very melodramatic. Extremely.
But I think it's maybe an excerpt from the book, but it really is, honestly.
Like, will you turn down the fucking gospel music? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but I'd like to hear what you're saying.
Hey,
really, you're crying? You gave the broad freaking questions before the debate.
Oh, also, John from San Antonio, Mike from PA, if you want in on this polling thing, send your emails to MR. They can give them to us. We could use some more data analysts. All right. I will make that connection for you guys. Leon Gittin, Sam, as a direct consequence of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, the Houses of Parliament are rife with allegations and gossip. The latest to resign is Secretary of Defense, Sir Michael Fallon, with more expected to follow. This is in Britain, folks. Then there is the disaster that is universal credit, which is the biggest shakeup of the benefit system since its inception. It's basically a massive cut in welfare payments and is leaving the most vulnerable in society destitute. It's quickly becoming the equivalent of Maggie Thatcher's poll tax, which brought down her government in the late 80s. Watch this space. Leon of London. Calling from 443 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 443. 443? 443.
Yes, hello?
Hello. Who's this? What is on your mind?
Yes. Sorry. My name is Prasanna. I'm from Laurel, Maryland. I wanted to talk to you guys about a great book written by Robert here, Dr. Robert here. It's called Without Conscience, and it describes Trump to a T. I mean, he defines his definition of psychopath. It's basically a person without conscience, and that's what you see with Trump. And basically, he has, he's part of the brain that feels emotion just does not work. So it's very easy for him to berate people, tell lies, because he feels no anxiety, no anger, no remorse. And he also mentions that for people like these, if you put them in, if you do therapy, it actually gets worse. So
It
it's
gets
really
worse.
a great book.
Sopranos, man.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, and
because they know they start to learn how they're supposed to react.
It just helps them manipulate other people. But
Correct.
may I just interject? Great Greek accent, sir.
No, actually, I'm not exactly from Greek, but yeah, I like coffee. Let's just say.
You like coffee?
But yeah, it's
All right. Well, that's
You know, I'm
interesting.
just
I'll look
copying.
into it. Without Conscience by Robert Here.
yeah, and yeah, Dr. Robert here, and if you could like get some psychiatrist or psychologist in your show and talk about that, it would be really great, because this is something that needs to come out, because there's some really
I got to be
statistics in
honest
there
with
too,
you.
like,
I got to be honest with you. I feel like the idea that Donald Trump has no conscience, I feel like that secret is out.
What?
Honestly,
yes,
like,
that is out, but
I mean,
the thing is that knowledge is there, yes, but the other knowledge is people like them do the most harm to the society.
I don't
So
doubt
the amount
that
of damage they do is incredible to the society. Like,
I'm going to check out the book.
Statistics, there's like,
I'm sold. I'll
Okay.
check out the book. I appreciate the call. Thanks. Bye. Auf Wiedersehen. Calling from a 718 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's Greg. I want to have a little bit of serious conversation.
Okay.
No Peter Thiel.
Okay. He's in the
but
bathroom.
Real quick, first about Bernie. What was the actual thing that made Bernie lose? Meaning, I understand the DNC was in Clinton's corner, but like, besides having less debates, what exactly? I mean, he did get less delegates also. It's not like
I mean, I do not think that there is a but-for reason associated with the DNC that caused Bernie Sanders to lose.
Yeah, because I'm a Bernie fan, but honestly, if you look truth straight in the face, I mean, he lost.
But
now,
yes, he lost. I think he should have started his campaign earlier. I think he should have started it with a belief that he could have won, et cetera, et cetera. However, that doesn't mitigate what the DNC did in terms of, I mean, that's why I don't use the word rigged, because the DNC, they tried to, they put their thumbs on the scales, but their thumbs were just not very weighty, frankly. But you also can't have an organization that is so corrupt that it's actually breaking their own rules. And clearly they have done that. And so you need to clean house. There's no doubt about it.
Of course. Look, I'm not going to give a libertarian perspective on it.
Good.
But I did want to talk about something more serious. You brought up the terrorism.
Yes.
And what's going on in New York. I mean, you and I were both in New York. Look, I mean, I've been saying this for years, I think since 2001, that terrorism is a problem of technology. The more technology you have available to just regular people, the more you have to watch everybody. It's sort of two sides of the same coin. You have the surveillance state, security state, and then you have terrorism. And honestly, I mean, you talked about Telegram. This guy started Telegram. It's interesting. He's sort of an app developer like myself, like Mark Zuckerberg. He made the Russian Facebook. It was wrested from him by Putin's associates. He finally had to sell and get out, and he went to France. And he started Telegram sort of as a reaction to this state surveillance that he resisted back in Russia. So it's sort of like this dilemma between, on the one hand, you have dissidents, and you don't want the government to lock them up, because Russia is very big on that, and China to a great extent with the firewall. And then you don't want that, but on the other hand, you also don't want ISIS congregating and talking to each other with no way to find that out. So that's sort of, as an app developer, you face these dilemmas all the time.
Right.
Hit it in the air.
All right, Greg. Look, I think your point is well taken. I mean, here's the. I will say this: there was. Are you there, Greg?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, back in, I don't know when, the 90s, there was a lot of controversy about, books at the library that had directions on how to make a bomb. On some level, the problem becomes greater when, people have access to other stuff. But there was nothing that this guy did that was particularly sophisticated, right? I mean, but the idea that he was radicalized online is just, sort of part of it. So I don't know. I mean, I think, yes, when we start getting drones that are the size of, a bottle cap that are checking you out, it's going to be a problem.
Hey, guess what?
But I appreciate
Guess what? I have some news for Greg.
No,
Guess what?
Bye.
I would prefer to drink blood of a homeless Nicaraguan than Greg. Okay? I hate him.
Okay.
He's so stupid.
Look, there are... Here is Tucker Carlson, who is very, very concerned.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's just so...
Oh, it's a question. Oh.
He's just so surprised. He can't believe how sort of melting pot extremists we have that are running our government. Go ahead.
Fulo Saipov rammed a rented truck into more than 20 New Yorkers, screaming Allahu Akbar. 8 people were murdered, and the country is once again asking why. But the answer this time is obvious. Those 8 people are martyrs to a diversity cult worshipped by a ruling class. Saipov was an Islamic radical from Uzbekistan who worked as an Uber driver. He wasn't a physician or an exceptional scientific mind or a business magnate. He was doing a job literally anybody could do in a country where we have, to this day, a severe shortage of low-skilled jobs for the poor in our working class. Why was this man even in our country? Well, he was here because this country's leaders have decided that diversity, in and of itself, is of greater importance than the well-being of this country's people.
Again, we had a terrorist attack in the 90s that was prevented by someone from Egypt who was brought in on this exact same visa. I don't know if they were a doctor or not.
Business magnet?
I don't know. My belief is they are not a business magnet. But the idea that this country is strengthened by having immigrants is not a relatively new one. In fact, it has been here almost as long as we have felt it appropriate to oppress people of other colors. As a country. So the idea that somehow there's, we now have diversity extremists in this country is not a recent phenomenon. In fact, it was what built this country and made this country, gave it some of its best attributes. So that's probably why. But what he wants to do is pit diversity with making this country better, as if he wants to make America great again with a fundamental part of America left out. Meanwhile, he goes on to, Tucker Carlson goes on to, he's shocked, right, with this guy. He's talking to Mark Krikorian. Who is Mark Krikorian? Who is this guy again?
He runs an immigration think tank.
Oh, he runs an immigration think tank. Yeah, here we go. And this is where Tucker Carlson thinks he's found out the worst thing that happened to black people in this country.
Everyone wants to come here. Why are we handing out green cards on the basis of a lottery?
People have been saying this repeatedly. In fact, the House a number of years ago even passed a bill
to get rid of the visa lottery, and it didn't go anywhere. It always comes up.
So who's
every
lobbying
year.
against it? I mean, just let's put a fine point on this.
The-
Where is the lobby that wants to preserve something that makes no sense?
There's two forces protecting it. One is narrow, one is broader. The narrow one, interestingly, is the Black Caucus, because they have now come to adopt this as their pet immigration program.
Pause it for 1 second. All right, just you gotta admire. I want to go back just a little bit. You got to admire the expertise of Fox News. As they are slamming immigrants, they're also going to slam any type of established black power in this country. Now, of course, we all know how much power the Black Caucus has in this country. After they were done with the reparations and after they were done with providing all of this job training for the African-American community in this country.
How many profiles get written on the Elijah Cummings
It
budget?
is unbelievable.
It's relentless.
The way that they got the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act, that was brilliant. We all know that if there's a policy in place, of course,
all to set the stage.
the Black Caucus has to be behind
The Black Caucus
it.
veto.
Of course.
Black Caucus
Right.
is ruthless.
They're ruthless. And they even do this even when their own party is out of power.
They still run everything around here.
It's unbelievable.
If you go to D.C.,
But
they'll
let's-
always tell you it's the black
Let's go.
guy who's in
Let's go.
charge.
Let's go.
One is narrow, one is broader. The narrow one, interestingly, is the Black Caucus, because they have now come to adopt this as their pet immigration program, because a lot of people from sub-Saharan Africa come through it. And so that's the kind of narrow issue. The broader issue
Let me
is
just say, has any
Pause it for 1 second.
policy-
Pause it for 1 second. So this is to drive sub-Saharan immigration.
We are here and we are part of the Black Caucus. Get out of my car. You are a white devil. You cannot vote in America
Wow,
anymore. The South Sudanese are the most important part of America. We have fled civil
Just
war,
go
mass
back
rape,
just a
and
little
killings,
bit, because
and
it
now
gets
we
even
run
better
this
than
place.
this. Now that they have, Fox has made it clear that our entire immigration policy of lottery-based immigration is a function of course, the Black Caucus, which controls all the power, and their obvious agenda of wanting to have more sub-Saharans in this country. Tucker's response is this.
Immigration program, because a lot of people from sub-Saharan Africa come through it. And so that's the kind of narrow issue. The broader issue
Let me
is
just say, has any single policy in modern America hurt Africans more than our immigration?
No,
African
it's a good
Americans?
question. And in fact, even African immigration is actually a problem for black Americans.
Look at the
Pause
numbers,
it,
exactly.
Pause it. I wonder if we could come up with any single policy that has hurt African Americans more in this country than the lottery-based immigration policy. Let's see. What could it be?
I might even be PC enough to suggest that, like, I don't know, redlining. But, you know, I'm a fucking
gonna say,
liberal.
not just redlining. In fact, we know of all those mortgages back in the post-war years, specifically excluded black people. And then, of course, there was the leaving them out of Social Security, largely jobs that were held by
You don't want to be on
African-Americans.
Social Security anyways. It breeds a dependency.
That whole thing with the vote, denying them the vote for a huge portion of our history of our country, and then all of the subsequent voter disenfranchisement that has been aimed at them.
We have stopped that decades ago. Stop going to history, old man.
The drug war.
Now black
Drug
people...
war is also a good one.
The drug war is worse for white people.
Slavery.
I'm not trying to be PC.
Slavery.
When do
is in
I get
there.
on Dave Rubin's show?
Jim Crow.
Jim Crow. Oh, Jim Crow. That's good.
Jim Crow wasn't pretty. It was kind of tough stuff, but it's really as bad
Segregated
as
schools seem to resonate.
Segregated schools were a strong signal, but I don't think they're as bad as a lottery system. We need to be a little rational.
Let's see. I mean, yeah, wait, we went over the whole thing about them being property, right?
Next, you're going to mention the Fugitive Slave Act.
That's also, okay.
Maybe the whole time where they weren't technically human according to the Constitution. I guess you could include that too if you are a real social justice warrior. They weren't part of the GI Bill either. I guess you will probably want to add that with all of your white liberal tears.
Fair enough. Gosh. I can't come up with any more off the top of my head.
But the one thing you're not brave enough to talk about is the lottery system.
That's right. The lottery system.
It is the worst.
And the lottery system.
There are jobs in illegal restaurants where you are paid under minimum wage. And very many black people would want this, but they cannot have it because we are being exploited instead of them. This is what Tucker is talking about. You have no courage.
I thought they were all black Africans, according to these people.
No, he corrected himself.
Well, when you are not posing in suicide girls, you are trying to excuse the violence in Chicago.
I wonder how they're doing.
You people are disgusting.
Tyson Chicken, hiring without those immigrants.
We don't do Tyson Chicken. That is for the Mexicans. Sorry, not to be PC.
I wasn't sure if I should sign up for TMBS, but after Michael's choice of sweater yesterday, I'm putting a membership on my Christmas list. 3 Rivers G. Donna Brazil in the caller. I mostly agree with him, but people disagree on whether people should stay in the Democratic Party. I urge everyone listening to get involved in the Democratic Party, get delegate positions, committee positions, chair positions. It's important that Bernie folk get into these positions and stay put for the 2020 election. Having our people there, it's vital next time. Angry. How about you, Sam? You don't subscribe to anarcho-syndicalism, do you? I feel like a radical centrist because I know a progressive MMT policy set is way more likely to get implemented. And Buonara. I'll tell you what Bernie Sanders did not do to the Democratic Party. He sure as hell didn't get them $24 million in debt, handing away tons of money to a bunch of consultant idiot grifters who then went on to lose massive numbers of elections. All right, well, I don't think you can hold that against him. I think that's probably a positive for him. Politics drawn poorly. McClatchy reported the Mercer owes $7 billion in taxes. Sweet. There's so much wrong in that statement. I don't even know where to begin.
He's also released a statement apparently where he's
talk about this
disavowing
tomorrow.
Milo.
Yes.
And he's going to try to...
We mentioned that up front.
Oh, I didn't realize that he... Oh, okay, I missed
He disavowed Milo. He's going to sell his part in Breitbart, and he's stepping down to CEO, and he's going to sell it all to Rebecca Mercer. Okay, but there's more to this story. And I have this literally on like one of the 50 tabs that I have. So there's a story about Mercer basically looking to try and get out of what he owes in terms of taxes. And they just, like a week ago, former Ernst & Young executive David Cowder has served as the interim head of the Internal Revenue Service starting November 13th. He served as the Director of National Tax Practices at Ernst & Young when his firm was engaged in a massive effort to assist wealthy clients with tax avoidance schemes. And this is coming in from in 2010, 4 of the individuals involved in the illegal tax shelter scheme were sentenced to serve 20 to 36 months in prison. 2 of the sentences were later overturned. In 2013, Ernst & Young paid the IRS $123 million settlement relating to the scheme. This guy is now the acting head of the IRS. We'll read into that. But part of this is basically, I think, has to do with Mercer. We'll see.
Isn't it a weird move if you want to dodge a tax bill under this administration to publicly disavow them and
just say you're under audit?
I think he wants to make sure that nothing gets tarred with him. The DNC means so much to those of us who gave time and money to them during Howard Dean's tenure, says Wu-Tang Clan. We can know what it can be and what it can do. Also, did you read Manafort's daughter text? Holy shitballs. Yeah, a long time ago. New ones, or this is from a while back?
I think it's just getting resurfaced.
Also, Telegram is a shitty protocol with numerous vulnerabilities. Not surprised Greg would like it. Signal is the app to use if you care about security.
Greg is so Gilbert!
Ian Baltimore. I don't understand how any of this would have helped Hillary win the primary at all. What did the DNC actually do to influence the outcome? No, not really anything. I mean, I made that clear. I agree with that assessment. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a corrupt organization. And here's the point. There's a huge opportunity cost, because what the DNC did not do is it did not prevent Bernie Sanders from winning, but it also has been a completely inept, decrepit organization as an organization, as an agency that seems to have done nothing but collect money and give it to friends that have not helped even the Democratic Party. I mean, they've lost the shit out of so many elections. Like, you know, that's probably the best argument that anybody has as to how DNC didn't rig the election, because they couldn't even rig it for the person they want to win. Never mind against the person they wanted to lose. They can't seem to do anything. It's a corrupt organization, and not just in terms of like ethically corrupt, but it's dysfunctional. And there's every reason to believe that this dysfunction is being encouraged. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello. This is Jim Bond. James Bond. My name is James Bond.
Okay.
Yep. I'm calling to reveal the real scandal, which will vindicate my good friend and true patriot Paul Manafort, who is not. I'm not Paul Manafort.
No, you're not Paul Manafort. You're James Bond.
No,
I mean, wasn't James Bond his password? All right, but go ahead.
In 2015, I discovered the truth about Hillary and the uranium which she was stealing and bringing to the Russians. And I was in Istanbul with a woman I fell in love with named Tatiana Romanova. And I'd fallen in love with Tatiana, but it turns out she was luring me to Istanbul. And in our hotel room on the other side of a double-sided mirror was Hillary herself. And Hillary entered my room disguised as a maid, where she attempted to murder me.
Excuse me.
Because she knew I knew that...
Excuse me. What you're describing is a scene from Russia with Love. And Tatiana Romanova, if I remember correctly, was a fictional...
She was a double agent.
Well, but she was
She was fantastic in the sack, don't get me wrong, but it turns out...
Excuse me.
It turns out
my understanding
she was working with Hillary the whole time, is what I'm trying to tell you, Sam.
And did you kill
whole
the
time.
maid and then say, I think she got the point?
Look, there's certain things I'm not really allowed to say at this point. But the important thing to remember is that Paul Manafort, who is, it's not who I am,
right,
per se, is totally innocent. And the media is ignoring the fact that Hillary tried to kill me in a hotel room disguised as a maid because I discovered the truth about Uranium One in 2015.
Okay, interesting. Well, it's quite a coincidence. Is there anything you can tell us about that time where you came in with and you found your girlfriend completely covered in gold?
It was hot.
Thank you.
It was a good time.
Appreciate the call. Thank you. That's
no problem. Anytime.
James Bond, regular caller to the show. James Bond.
It's a really good Manafort impression.
So Sean Hannity is been feeling extremely embarrassed as of late. He's also very concerned, and he has reason to be concerned. As you know, Paul Manafort's indictment, the biggest message that's come out of that arrest is that Robert Mueller is not going to stop looking or is not going to ignore crimes that have been committed that he comes across in the course of the Russian investigation. Papadopoulos may have everything to do with the Russian investigation. However, Manafort signals that if Donald Trump has any financial improprieties in his background, he may want to be very, very concerned about it. And as we know, Donald Trump calls Sean Hannity after the show every night. So Hannity is a little bit on edge himself. And he was crying on Twitter the other day about how people were making so much of him saying President Clinton. It was really funny. So what do you do in this situation? People are mocking you for a slip of the tongue. You desperately look for someone else's slip of the tongue. And when you can't quite find one, you sort of make it up a little bit. And don't have any hesitation showing everybody that you're making it up. Good.
And welcome back to Hannity now. Following
Pause it
the
for
New
1
York City
second. You know what I just realized? Hannity puts his name over the Superman symbol. Isn't it? It's also, oddly enough, I think very similar to the Paw Patrol symbol. But go ahead.
And welcome back to Hannity now. Following the New York City terrorist attack, some predictably and sadly in the mainstream media, they're just having a hard time understanding the mindset behind these actions. Now, shortly after the horrific incident, you have liberal fake news, CNN's fake Jake Tapper. Well, he described the phrase shouted by the terrorist, Allahu Akbar. Well, he said that sometimes can be something said in beautiful circumstances. Let's play it.
The FBI is taking over this case because it appears now that this is terrorism.
The Arabic chant, Allah Akbar, God is great, sometimes said under the most beautiful of circumstances, and too often we hear of it being said in moments like this.
Oh, and they had a lower third on CNN, and it actually said, oh, the terrorist was, well, not terrorist, so the suspect was saying God is great in Arabic. Well, that's actually called Allahu Akbar. Now, Tapper has since been levying multiple attacks on the Fox News channel, reporting the comments in context that you just listened.
Hold on for 1 second. So he's mad that that CNN was translating Allahu Akbar because maybe some people don't know that?
Jihadi Jake.
You call it translate, I call it laundering Islamic terror.
Oh, there we go. All right, so let's dial it back a little bit here. And Hannity is... and the funny part is that Tapper said, I mean, it's true what he said, right? And the thing is, it's almost as if like Hannity was like, oh, we weren't supposed to show the part where he says, and sometimes it's said in situations like this. But here,
and levying multiple attacks on the Fox News channel, reporting the comments in context that you just listened to. He tweeted, quote, Fox News is lying. I said, it can be said at beautiful moments, wedding, birth, and too often at times like this, horrific terrorist attacks. Then he went on, quote, and yes, I know they do this all the time. Still, literally, the day after this horrific attack, they would launch this smear. It's sick. Hey, Jake, maybe that's why you have low ratings. Tell your audience the truth.
There you go.
That's the best part of Hannity is that even when he's dunking on somebody, he still gets confused. It's like, hey, Jake. Maybe that's why you're bad at TV.
All
Terrorism.
right. I'm going to take one more phone call. I'm sorry, we got people holding on, but I got to jump. Who's this? Calling from 440 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Ian, and I'm calling from Buffalo.
Ian, got to be quick. What's on your mind? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, just wanted your take on the. So I'm originally from Ohio, but I moved to Buffalo, so I don't really know the state politics. What do y'all think about the Constitutional Convention? I have no idea.
Yeah, you know, I have been meaning to look into that, and I don't know. I honestly I don't have a strong sense of what's behind that, and I got to dig into it. But I will check that out. I know people want to know before Tuesday.
Yeah, I got there are people whose opinions I respect on both sides. The League of Women Voters supports it, but apparently a lot of environmental groups are against it. So yeah, just wanted your take.
Yeah, I can't.
thanks, man.
I'll check it out. I appreciate the call.
All right,
All
thanks.
right, I'm going to take this one last call because call from a 215 area code.
Hey, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. Got to be quick. I took your call even though I promised myself I
Okay.
wouldn't. Who is this?
All right. Well, listen. Hey, this is Ray. I'm calling from Philly. Listen.
Yeah.
Bernie is not a Democrat. Donna Brazil is a lifelong Democrat. Not only is she a lifelong Democrat, but she's a product of the Great Society. There's still an institutional memory there that is going to fight to reclaim an economic policy versus identity politics, of which the Clintons have simply failed at. That's it.
Fair enough. Appreciate the call. I think Bernie would also argue, frankly, that he's also a product of the Great Society. He's talked about, being able to
Product
go to
of
school.
the Khmer Rouge,
All right.
motherfucker.
We're going to do 6 IMs. In these sticks, so why y'all rehashing 2016 Congress is trying to fleece everyone for tax cuts for the rich? This is why Democrats lose. Can we focus, please? Look, the plan is not out yet. So how well do you guys think Don Jr. and Jared will do in prison? Wait a second. How are you doing both those things simultaneously? You're getting distracted.
Focus.
Let me give you distraction. We are all dum-dums today. Henry Wallace. Bull Progs. Wasn't Tim Kaine replaced with Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the DNC after Obama won the nomination? Political back-scratching and long cons. Money is greater than caucusing in democratic world. Mercer is stepping down, by the way. Cocodopoulos, just finished your survey. Shofar. I really wanted to make jokes about Michael's truck stop restroom proclivities in the comments section, but I respect the process too much. It's very nice of you. I appreciate that. Great leap forward. I grew up in the UK at the height of the IRA campaign. What terrorists and governments don't understand is that you can only scare people for so long. Fear is not sustainable. People will have to continue living and will do so. I'm sure that's playing out in the U.S. It's called terror fatigue. This is often demonstrated by people's reaction to insane acts and largely insane over-the-top responses by government. People are fundamentally rational despite attempts to change that. Yes, the flip side of that is you start getting used to having a president who's a lunatic. David from Riverside. Can we hear Bernie or bust Bill Clinton on the Donna Brazil? Oh, yeah, I think we have.
I think we haven't heard enough, but of course Sam's going to want to silence me because he's an establishment hack who can't even get Chris Hayes' slot. Sad.
Pod save neoliberalism. I love Michael's calls, but so effing depressing. Michael from PA. Eric, Minnesota. Michael's Gangsta Hillary is starting to sound like a 1950s robot. Cola Dict. That IRS appointment is damn. Combined with his EPA and others, Trump would appoint Al Capone to the FBI and bin Laden to the CIA if they were alive. Attorney Andrew. On whether you can sue the DNC over the loan and funding agreement with Hillary Victory Fund, I have no clue, but the Strohs won the series. Actually, I can't resist. The DNC lawsuit was brought by small money Sanders donors. The district court dismissed the lawsuit because those members could not establish standing, or could they establish a violation of law with their allegations? The blessed plaintiff would be a member of the Bernie campaign itself. Best if it was campaign official, they would have to establish that the DNC legally agreed to be neutral toward the candidates. Ultimately, any suit would likely have broadside attack on the loan and funding agreement because it's difficult to establish standing otherwise. I mean, I would assume that other officers of the DNC would have standing as well. But you know better because you're Attorney Andrew on the IM. And the final IM of the day. Sam, can you touch on the mortgage interest deduction component of the GOP tax plan? Will, when it gets released and we have a sense of it. Supposedly, I've heard that there is a lower threshold from which, but I don't know if it's you can purchase a house or if that's an income threshold. So we need to see the tax plan before I can comment on it. But I think it's ultimately probably not bad policy, to be honest with you. But we will talk more later. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.